Chapter 120. But her eyes were really bright as the stars tonight. Yi Qian saw that he still misunderstood and became furious. You're an old man, what's there to invite? Not only was he 6 years older than her, he was also very dangerous. Even if she ate a bear's heart and leopard's guts, she would never touch him. Old man. She said he was an old man. Xia Jinyuan suddenly felt what it felt like to bring disaster upon oneself. He took a deep breath of the air filled with dried leaves and said with a faint smile, "The 20-year-old me is an old man? Fine, even if I'm an old man, don't you think that I'm much more attractive than those little boys in your school?" Undeniably, that was true. But even if that was the case, what did it have to do with her? Can't we stand up and talk about this properly? She wanted him to get lost, but he refused. Yi Qian suppressed his anger and tried to negotiate. I'm really out of breath from being squashed by you. She was unintentionally teasing him again. But she had been suppressing him for a long time. Xia Jinyuan's face darkened and he did not let go immediately. Instead, he gritted his teeth and said, "You ungrateful girl, you're lucky to have met me. If it were another man, he would have knocked on your door in the middle of the night." She pulled away a little but did not get up immediately. He knew a little about the little girl's temperament. If she really got up, her fists would come at him like raindrops. Jun Yen restrained his mischievous smile, and his clear voice was incomparably serious as he said, "Remember, girl. Number 1, you are not allowed to sit on a man's body, especially on his waist. Number 2, you are not allowed to touch a man's body. Number 3, you are not allowed to use words like feel, press, straddle, or ride on a man. Number 4, I'm letting go now, so you are not allowed to do anything else." When Yi Qian heard this, he finally understood what was going on. But did he have to use such a method to tell her that men were not to be trifled with? She was scared silly by him. "Fine, I promise I won't do anything else." She was clearly gritting her teeth, but her voice sounded clear and calm. However, when Xia Jinyuan looked at the deep bite marks on his wrist, he understood that no matter how old a woman was, their promises were useless. Hiss, little girl, just how ruthless is she? How big was his mouth? It was just enough to leave a circle of teeth marks. Judging from her teeth, the little girl also had 2 canine teeth. Her teeth were also very neat. When he talked to her during the day, he could see that her teeth were neat and white as pearls. Yi Qian also realized how hard he had bitten Hu Xiaoheng. He pursed his lips and looked at the satchel on Hu Xiaoheng's waist. He reached into the satchel and took out the first aid kit that all soldiers were given. "Give me your hand." She lowered her head and muttered, "Even though he's so skilled, he doesn't know how to dodge. He could only disinfect it first and get the vaccine when he returned to the army." Xia Jinyuan, who was about to deal with it himself, saw her open the satchel on his waist. He knew that the little girl was also frightened. As he reached his hand over, he sighed and said, "You heartless little girl. You bit me as if I was your enemy." If he had really dodged, the hot-tempered little girl would probably be so angry that she would ignore him. If a bite could calm her down, then it wouldn't matter. Yi Qian opened the first aid kit and took out medical alcohol and iodine. She grabbed his strong wrist and said angrily, "How dare you say I'm heartless? If it were any other girl, they would have screamed for help by now." Chapter 121. She lowered her head and carefully and gently disinfected the wound. Xia Jinyuan looked at the girl's delicate and translucent skin under the light. The smile on his thin lips subconsciously became gentler. "Are you exaggerating? You seemed very scared just now." Yi Qian looked up and glanced at him. If it were a timid girl, she would have fainted long ago. "Yeah, so it's good that it's you, right?" She was indeed still angry. Sigh, the little girl already had a problem with him, and now she was angry. How long would he have to coax her again? His deep eyes held a faint smile as he said, "Fortunately, you didn't scream. Otherwise, I would be in trouble." After disinfecting the wound with alcohol and applying a layer of iodine, Yi Qian put away the medical supplies with a cold expression. "I'm angry now. Don't talk to me." When Xia Jinyuan heard this, he was instantly amused. Of course, he had to coax her properly. The little girl was here, so of course he had to coax her. However, he still had to make things clear. He reached out and rubbed her head. That's why I said you have no conscience. Did you forget what I said before? 14 years old isn't that young, classmate. His warning echoed in Yi Qian's mind. He suddenly felt his face turn red. You're not allowed to sit on a man's waist. You're fighting, how can you be so careful? You're not allowed to take the initiative to touch a man's body. Didn't she just pat him in a moment of happiness? You're not allowed to talk about your feelings to a man. T. It was all his own imagination. The more he thought about it, the angrier Yi Qian got. He glared at him fiercely and said angrily, "It's not what you're thinking at all." "What feelings?" "I'm referring to the feeling of winning." "What nonsense are you thinking?" Come. Drink some water first. Don't be angry, don't be angry. Xia Jinyuan looked at the little face in front of him. It was as if his heart had been soaked in spring water on a hot day. It felt very comfortable. He took out the military bottle and handed it to her. "It's clean. You didn't drink a single mouthful." When the little girl lost her temper, her eyes, which were originally as bright as stars, were now so lively that he wanted to touch them. If he really touched it, he was afraid that he would have another bite on his left hand tonight. Yi Jian took a look at the water bottle that he handed over and rubbed her temples as if she had a headache. Sometimes he was cold, sometimes he was deep, sometimes he was elegant, and sometimes he felt very close to you. Such an unpredictable man made her feel danger and wanted to stay away from him. However, his charm was that you wanted to get close to him and learn from him. Yi Qian didn't take the water bottle he handed over and glared at him unwillingly. He didn't want to continue this topic that wasn't suitable for him to discuss with her. After calming himself down, he said calmly, "I'm not angry. I know what you said. Don't mention it again. I'll be careful." Xia Jinyuan had taught her this lesson today, and it left a deep impression on her that she still wanted to hit him. She gradually walked out of her embarrassment and anger, but in Xia Jinyuan's eyes, it seemed like she was still shy. After looking at the little girl who was in a dilemma for a while, his thin lips curved into a sexy smile. At this moment, her usually cold eyes seemed to have a color that they didn't usually have. Although they were beautiful, they weren't seductive. They were like a blooming lotus, but also like peach blossoms. She no longer had that faintly discernible aloofness. Her cold eyes were bright, making her even more attractive. As if he had been staring for too long, Xia Jinyuan calmly looked away and casually changed the topic. "What are your plans for the summer vacation? Will you be in the military?" Chapter 122. It was not a bad idea to spend time in the army. After returning from work, he could tease the bold little girl. With the change of topic, Yi Qian quickly got over the awkwardness. She calmed down for a moment before replying, "No, I took an exam. After that, I'll be going to Australia. I'll be back by August 6th or 7th. Taking an exam and then possibly going to Australia? The World Mathematical Olympiad?" She did not say it out loud, but he could guess it accurately. At the same time, a smile slowly appeared in his unfathomable eyes. The World Mathematical Olympiad. Coincidentally, he had also taken part in it. Yi Qian saw that he had guessed it so quickly and looked at him with some confusion. Soldiers even care about this? Did he need to tell her that the path she was taking now was the path he had taken in the past? She was 14 years old and he was 14 years old. Such a coincidence. It really surprised him. However, why did he feel that she did not have much interest in this kind of meaningful competition? Take the exam well. It will be of great help to your knowledge. You'll meet a group of real geniuses. Their conversation style and talents are all worth learning from. The little girl had always had her own ideas. If she really did not have much interest, he was afraid that she would not put in much effort in the exam. There was a faint sound of static in the earpiece. Xia Jinyuan raised his hand to press down on the earpiece. The lazy and relaxed expression on his face disappeared in an instant. His elegant eyebrows revealed a stern expression as he said in a deep voice, "Q King received." Please reply. There is the latest news from the international side of the stone-crushing operation. The commander's voice came from the earpiece. After he said a few words, Xia Jinyuan suddenly glanced at Yi Qian. A faint smile flashed across his cold eyes. The communication was cut off. Xia Jinyuan stood up first and looked meaningfully at Yi Qian. Let's go. I'll send you down the mountain. Dad and Uncle Chen are waiting for you downstairs. It was already midnight. Yi Qian saw that it was so late and hurriedly stood up. Why is it so late? Let's go, let's go. I still have to go to school tomorrow. She didn't feel that it was very late at all. Why was it already midnight? After contacting the other 5 soldiers, a group of people came down from the mountain. Xia Jinyuan sent Yi Qian to the outermost sentry post of the army. Seeing that she didn't look tired, he smiled and said, "Let me remind you again. Remember everything I said before." I told you not to mention it again. Yi Qian, who didn't want to talk about it at all, glared at the man who had wiped off the paint on his face, revealing his handsome face. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, she jumped into the car and slammed the door. The motorcade sent her back to the village to meet up with Uncle Zhen and Principal Chen. Xia Jinyuan, who had a faint smile on his handsome face, watched the car leave. He stood there for a while and said softly, "What should I do? It seems that I like to see her angry face when she is annoyed by me." The regiment commander's voice came through the earpiece again. Xia Jinyuan turned around and jumped into the car with elegant steps that couldn't be ignored. He rushed to the regiment commander's office. By the time he returned to the dormitory, the sky was already bright. He took off his combat uniform and walked into the shower, revealing his muscular upper body. The cool water washed over his perfectly sculpted and extremely sexy body. When he raised his hand, his gaze fell on the bite marks on his wrist. Only then did he remember that he hadn't gone for the vaccine yet. Within 24 hours, he had to go to the infirmary at 9. When he lay on the bed, he thought of her fleeing figure again. In the brightly lit dormitory, the elegant yet dangerous man curved his lips slightly and closed his eyes to sleep. Yi Qian, who had been taught a special lesson by a pure man, spent the next few days waving her fists in the middle of the night. Even in her dreams, she was beating up Xia Jinyuan. Chapter 123. However, this education class that had left a deep impression on her had indeed taught her that when interacting with boys, be it in terms of words or actions, she had to maintain a certain distance from them. 2 weeks later, Fujian Town welcomed the end of the semester exam. Yi Qian and the other 18 students who needed to go to the provincial first school to take the exam had 2 days off after the exam. They left at 7 a.m. on June 29th and took a total of 18 hours to arrive at the provincial capital. This time, including the students from Fujian Town Middle School, there were more than 200 students participating in the provincial selection. Out of these 200 students, only 12 would be able to enter the national selection exam in the capital. After the national selection exam, only 12 people could represent the country in the World Olympic Games. These were the true elites of the elites. The provincial first school was the largest, best, and strictest school in the province. It was divided into junior high school and senior high school. Yi Qian, who had rested well last night, walked into the school that she had no chance to go to in her previous life. The hot sun did not affect her mood. Headmaster Chen, who had accompanied Headmaster Chao, stood on the 5th floor of the male dormitory. When he saw Yi Jian strolling in the garden, he smiled and said to Headmaster Chao, "This girl's mental fortitude is stronger than the average student. Others are still studying on this day, but she's walking around. The exam is also a psychological battle. It's good that she's like this." Principal Chao smiled. His expression and words showed that he had high hopes for Yi Qian. Only 12 students will be selected. The capital has always taken up more than half of the students. Even if only one representative from the province goes abroad, it will be an affirmation of the province's education. Therefore, once Yi Qian was selected, she would represent the country and the province. Principal Chen understood the hidden meaning in Principal Chao's words. However, he did not care about fame and fortune. He said calmly, "We just hope that it won't affect her life." She doesn't need interviews or news. This is what I hope for. This is also the request she made when she agreed to participate. Old Chow, please bear with it. She doesn't need fame and fortune. Sigh, she's indeed a student taught by you. Principal Chow patted his colleague's shoulder and said with admiration, let's see if she can make it and become one of the 12 students. In this regard, Principal Chen had full confidence in Yi Qian, but, after a slight pause, he sighed and said, Yi Qian really doesn't have much interest in this kind of competition. As for how to convince her to take the exam seriously and strive to become one of the top 12 students in the country, I'm afraid we'll have to do some brainstorming. After Principal Chow heard this, he laughed heartily. I think there's someone who can convince Yi Qian. In fact, she will definitely do her best. Come, I'll take you to a place. You know this person. When Headmaster Chen saw who it was, his eyes turned serious. He looked at the young major and said after Headmaster Chow left, I have a bad feeling about this. On such a hot day, Principal Chen suddenly felt a chill. However, Yi Qian leisurely walked out of the library and read the original English classic that she had borrowed. She took a slow stroll from 9 in the morning until 11 in the afternoon. She was still strolling by Swan Lake in the province's No. 1 middle school. Swan Lake was an old scene that had been preserved from the flames of war. The surface of the lake was clear and sparkling. Fish could be seen swimming in the clear water. The willow trees on the banks swayed gently in the wind. Chapter 124. Birds flew across the surface of the lake from one side and landed lightly on the other side of the lake in the ripples. Yi Qian sat on a stone bench and looked at the picturesque scenery. He raised his head and covered his face with a book to block the sunlight that shone through the willow branches. Feeling the cool breeze by Swan Lake, he felt peaceful and had no other thoughts. Yi Qian. The peace was broken. Yi Qian didn't respond. He closed his eyes and refused to be disturbed. Provincial First High School used to be Gao Yang's school. He came back just to accompany Yi Ying. The two of them whispered as they walked along the embankment. They saw someone sitting comfortably under the green willows. The slender figure was like a scene in a painting. Yi Ying secretly bit her lip and didn't say anything. She just waited to see how Gao Yang would respond. We're going to the cafeteria now. Let's go together? Perhaps he was used to Yi Qian's indifference. Gao Yang's eyes flashed with a hint of helplessness. He said lightly, the cafeteria is a bit far. Let's go together. It would be rude if she didn't answer. Although, she didn't mind being rude in front of him. She took away the heavy English original book that blocked the sunlight and opened her eyes. There was a faint alienation in her dark eyes. Oh, I know how to get there. She patted the hardcover book. You guys go first. I still have to read for a while. Read for a while? Yi Ying's gaze fell on the thick English classic. She seemed to have heard a joke. She laughed and said, I really want to know. Can you understand it? Gao Yiyang glanced at it. A Ferry to Arms was translated into Chinese as A Farewell to Arms. It was the early masterpiece of the famous American writer Ernest Hemingway. It was regarded as a classic in modern literature. This book was based on Hemingway's own experiences in the war. It was a sad and moving elegy with war and love as the main theme. Provincial First High School's library has a lot of high-quality books. Your A Ferry to Arms is the original. Reading more can improve your English. Gao Yang, who was fluent in American English, did not doubt that Yi Qian could understand it. He had seen it in the previous English exam. Yi Ying had originally intended to embarrass Yi Qian, but in the end, she received his pertinent advice. Feeling uncomfortable, she smiled and said, That's good. If there's anything you don't understand, can't you ask Gao Yang? Yi Qian, we're from the same school. Let's go to the cafeteria for a meal and talk about tomorrow's exams. Is it that difficult? It's not difficult. I just don't want to be with you guys. Their relationship was already like this. Did he expect her to have anything good to say? Yi Qian smiled as he looked at Yi Ying, whose words were full of sarcasm. He said slowly, Moreover, we both know that we have nothing to talk about. Why do we have to put on an act? Sorry, I'm a more honest person. If there's something I don't like or hate, I'll say it directly. I'm not like Yi Ying, who likes to destroy peace. The only thing missing was the word hypocrite pasted on Yi Ying's forehead. Moreover, the two people she hated were together, and they were even going to the cafeteria to eat together. Sigh, she would vomit while eating. Yiqian. Hearing that she was mocking her hypocrisy, Ying was embarrassed and angry. She looked at the boy beside her in panic. When she saw that Gao Yang's expression was just as ugly, she suppressed her panic and smiled. Then we can't be friends anymore. Yiqian, remember, you're the one who rejected our friendship. Next time, you'd better explain clearly to others. Whenever she thought about what Principal Chen said last time, she felt suffocated. Chapter 125. I'm not rejecting you, but... Yiqian paused intentionally and saw Yi Ying's expression suddenly become unnatural. She looked at him cautiously, afraid that he would say something unfavorable to her. Gao Ying, who had been rebuffed, pulled Yi Ying's wrist, glanced at Yiqian, and said coldly, "Let's go." Since she didn't want to see him, then let's just leave. After what happened at noon, Yiqian's ears were much quieter when he met the two of them again in the afternoon. The other students were immersed in their revision in the provincial first high school, but Yiqian, who had already relaxed during the day, didn't enter the classroom. At 5:30 p.m., the sunset covered the horizon like a piece of brocade. Walking in the golden sunset, they walked out of the school gate with light steps. Tonight, they were going to the shooting range to practice moving targets. It was the training range of the provincial first high school, which was only an hour's drive away. An inconspicuous black car with a red flag was parked at the gate. The car was inconspicuous, but the license plate was conspicuous. It was the license plate of the Southern Province Military District. Inside the car, Xia Jinyuan saw Yiqian looking left and right through the rearview mirror. His handsome face smiled, opened the door, and elegantly got out of the car. "Student Yi, look over here." Seeing Xia Jinyuan in casual clothes, which lacked the coldness of a soldier, but was more languid and casual, Yiqian's instinctive reaction was, "Let's go. Girl, get in." Then, Principal Chen leaned out of the car, smiled, and waved for her to come over. Yiqian, who wanted to leave and had already retreated to the school gate, naturally took a step back and calmly walked over. Xia Jinyuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was troublesome. This girl was avoiding him like he was a snake. The air conditioning in the car was very strong, but after listening to Xia Jinyuan's words, Yiqian didn't feel cold at all. Her bright eyes stared at Xia Jinyuan without blinking. Although she couldn't calm down, she still said calmly, "How can I help you? During the whole process, I need to do something." Did you see that? This was the little girl who dared to face the criminal alone, dared to fight side by side with him in the night rain, and was not afraid at all. "Yiqian, once you agree, do you know that you will be in danger at any time?" He looked at her deeply, but there was a faint smile on his thin lips. "Moreover, if there is any danger, we may not be able to support you immediately." When it came to serious matters, she was no longer trying to hide it from him. He had to admit that this bold girl had a spirit of adventure, but she was not impulsive. It was indeed reassuring. Yiqian didn't answer immediately, but looked at him with a half-smile. When she saw that Xia Jinyuan's gaze was slightly restrained and his expression was a little unnatural, she slowly said, "Captain Xia, the reason you came to me, other than believing in me, is that you think I'm the best choice, right?" Principal Chen was already laughing out loud. "Captain Xia, oh Captain Xia, Yiqian was groomed by me and a first-rank sergeant. You're asking her if she's afraid or not, and if she's in danger. You're asking the wrong question." Then he said to Yiqian, "Girl, everything is fraught with danger, but the most important thing is how you're going to resolve it. Working with the military and having contact with the international police, I don't want you to miss out on such a good opportunity to practice. Although, I'm also very worried. But, girl, worry and fear are like stones on the ground. You have to step on them and you'll be able to step over them steadily. As a soldier, even if there is a mountain of knives and a sea of fire in front of you, you have to move forward." Chapter 126. For this exam, Yiqian had to give it his all. He had to pass and become one of the 12 students representing the country. Xia Jinyuan had participated in the World Mathematical Olympiad held in England. Even though it had been 6 years, he could still impart some of his experience to Yiqian. During the 1-hour walk from school to the shooting range, Yiqian communicated with him seriously. Occasionally, their eyes would meet, making it so that Principal Chen couldn't interrupt. The next day, more than 200 students entered the exam hall after going through a stricter inspection than the college entrance exam. This time, the exams for the 3rd and 2nd years were separated. Yiqian walked slowly to the exam hall and saw Gao Yang and Ying standing at the door. The boy had his head down, the girl had her head up. They were talking about something. "Please make way." Yiqian walked over and stood at the door blocked by the two of them. He said calmly, "Or, you can talk outside." "Thank you." Ying glanced at her with a hint of contempt in her eyes. She didn't walk away and said to Gao Yang, "Hurry up and go to the exam hall. I'm fine here. Thank you for tutoring me every night. No matter what, I'll do my best." Huh. Unlike some people who think they're so great that they don't even study in the classroom every night. After the exam, wait for me in front of the flower bed downstairs. Gao Yang moved sideways to let Yiqian pass between the two of them. His gaze slowly and consciously fell over, and he saw an almost perfect side profile pass by his eyes. Yiqian's gaze was cold and straight. He didn't look around or look at anyone else as he walked into the classroom. Indifference, disregard. She could really do it. Gao Yang's gaze brushed past Yiqian's face. He lowered his eyes and pursed his lips. He turned around and left the exam hall. "Just you wait, Yiqian. I'll embarrass you so much that you won't be able to show your face in school." After he left, Ying quickly caught up with Yiqian. She kept the smile on her face as she brushed past Yiqian. She said softly with a gloomy expression, "I will make you regret it completely." Yiqian smiled and glanced at her casually. He didn't even bother to reply and sat down on the seat with his name on it. Looking at Yi Ying's gloomy face, he knew that ignoring someone was always more infuriating than acknowledging them. When the mathematics test papers were handed out, the students could already hear the sound of gasping. Difficult, these were extremely difficult questions. Yiqian glanced at the teacher who came in with the chalk box and laser pointer. His dark eyes narrowed slightly. This exam didn't seem to be that simple. It wouldn't continue like an ordinary exam. Her intuition had always been good. About 10 minutes later, Yiqian, who had just finished writing side A, suddenly heard the invigilator say, "Please listen carefully." The invigilator didn't give the examinees any time to react. The invigilator read out a set of questions. Before any of the students could pull their minds away from the test papers, Yiqian put down her pen and stood up to answer the questions accurately. Correct. Yiqian sat down under the teacher's approving gaze and continued to answer the questions on both sides of the CD. After she answered and sat down, the other students finally understood what was going on. This was indeed a very special exam. Not only did it require a written exam, but they also had to be wary of the teacher's occasional oral questions. Maintaining the frequency of one oral answer every 2 minutes had already caused many students to be completely distracted. They were so nervous that they couldn't even hold their pens properly, let alone answer the questions. Yiqian didn't give Yi Ying a chance to stand up. Or rather, she didn't give the other students a chance at all. When she answered the teacher's questions, the pen in her hand didn't stop moving. Yiqian's existence imperceptibly brought a lot of pressure to all the students. Chapter 127. By the time the math exam was over, a few girls had already walked out of the classroom in tears. Yiqian looked at them and sighed softly in his heart. There were only 12 students in the entire country, so she had to pass. After the 2 exams in the morning, the top 10 students' names and scores were announced on the radio. It could be said that the top 10 students all got full marks. But according to the time taken to answer the questions, Yiqian was far ahead. Crack! Ying broke a ballpoint pen in half. Her face was gloomy as she pressed her lips together. Her originally beautiful eyes were filled with malice. I heard that Yi Qian is a student from a town's middle school. Oh my god, even the students from the province's first high school can't compare to him. He handed in his paper too quickly. I was sitting on his left, but he had already handed in his paper before I could even finish my paper. A few students walked past Yi Ying with rueful expressions on their faces, and the words that drifted over tormented Yi Ying even more. Jealousy, resentment, caused her delicate and pretty facial features to twist like an evil witch's, emitting a dense chill. What are you thinking about? Gao Yang walked over with a bottle of mineral water in his hand. He saw Yi Ying standing motionless under the scorching sun from afar. She seemed to be thinking about something, but she was completely unaware that she was being baked in the sun. Yi Ying's shoulders moved slightly. She turned around, her pretty face showing only faint disappointment. Yi Qian won. I lost. What should I do, Gao Yang? I've disappointed you. Her previous confidence was gone. The sadness she revealed made Gao Yang feel that the girl in front of him was so real, and not fake. There's no such thing as Yi Ying. If the world is a pyramid, then there will always be some people standing at the top and some at the bottom. Gao Yang pointed out realistically. His intention was to let Yi Ying see through it and not to worry too much. Who knew that after Yi Ying heard this, she almost lost her composure? Did he mean that Yi Qian was at the top of the pyramid, and she was at the bottom? Again, you didn't lose, and you didn't disappoint me. Do your best, Yi. Gao Yang did not lower his head to look at the girl's expression. His heart was no calmer than Yi Qian's. Or rather, no student could remain calm after hearing Yi Qian's score and exam time. Unfortunately, Yi Ying didn't listen to him at all. She said goodbye to Gao Yang with a gloomy heart and threw the broken ballpoint pen into the trash can. She didn't go back to the dormitory immediately. Instead, she walked toward the school's canteen with a gloomy face. Just wait and see. She would definitely not allow this wretched girl to continue like this. The students were shocked, and the teachers from the various cities were no exception. Yi Qian seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Not only did he crush the students, he also crushed the teachers ruthlessly. Xia Jinyuan, who had been paying attention to the results, heard about Yi Qian's results on the radio for 2 consecutive days. Looking at the calm and confident girl in front of him, his thin lips curved into a smile. Even his unfathomable eyes were filled with amusement. No wonder Principal Chen said that you don't have to attend classes at night for the next 15 days. Yi Qian didn't know about this yet. When he heard this, his dark eyes lit up slightly. He looked at the dangerous man who had appeared in front of him for 2 consecutive days and asked cautiously, "How did you find out about it before me?" The things she cared about were always so interesting. Also, her little face was full of vigilance. He couldn't help but want to tease her. Chapter 128. Do you want to know why? The corners of his lips were slightly raised. His noble and elegant aura was not suppressed by his military uniform. Even a slight smile was enough to make one feel that he was extraordinarily noble. The contours of his side profile were very perfect. When he smiled, the corners of his eyes were raised, revealing a trace of faintly discernible wickedness. It was the kind of man's charm that would make a woman's heart beat faster and make her gaze involuntarily follow him. Perhaps Xia Jinyuan himself was aware of this, so at most, his smile was just slightly raised, and his deep eyes were still calm. But when facing Yi Qian, there were always many indulgences and exceptions. As long as he was not on a mission, he would not restrain his charm at all. Instead, he would naturally face her and use his true self to communicate with her. Yi Qian frowned slightly, then smiled and said, "I don't want to know. In any case, I already know the result I want." Her reply caused the smile on his thin lips to deepen. A dark light flashed through his slightly raised black eyes, but it only lasted for a few breaths before he calmed down. Even though he liked to tease her and see the lively expression on her face, he also knew that he had to stop before he went too far. Principal Chen said that although he hopes that you can participate in more actual combat, he is still worried. Faced with a girl who would wrap herself in layers of hard shells whenever she felt that something was wrong, he could only be more patient. "I will wait for you at the school gate at 6 o'clock. For the next week, I will be here to train with you. Hearing this, Yiqian secretly took a deep breath before saying, I hope I didn't cause you any trouble. In other words, for the next 7 nights, he would be teaching her. It's not troublesome. In fact, I am very interested. Xia Jinyuan said with interest. As he leisurely admired the subtle changes in her expression, his deep, dark eyes did not conceal his interest in teaching her at all. However, Yiqian had a headache when he spoke in such a sarcastic tone. It was as if he was trying to express something, but in fact, he was just overthinking it. Seeing her frown, Xia Jinyuan restrained his expression and revealed a coldness that could not be ignored. You can go to the cafeteria to eat first. If you don't appear at the school gate at 6 o'clock sharp, you can take the car to the shooting range. Just as Yiqian was about to speak, she suddenly felt a dark gaze fall on her. As she nodded in response, she turned her body slightly and caught the gaze from the corner of her eye. There is someone behind the tree to your right. She is a student from Town Middle School. She is a girl with shoulder-length hair. Xia Jinyuan raised his hand and placed it on Yijian's shoulder, creating a false impression that he was pushing Yijian away so that she would turn around and go back to school. With his action, Yizichen was directly facing the Wutong tree in the right direction. With just one look, Yiqian knew who the girl hiding behind the tree was. Other than Ying, who else could it be? Ying hid behind the tree and stared unblinkingly at the man in front of her who was acting intimately with Yiqian. The corners of her mouth curved into a sinister and cold smile. Unfortunately, she did not have a camera. Otherwise, she could take a picture and post it on the school's blackboard. Even if Principal Chen came forward, he would not be able to explain why Yiqian was acting so intimately with a man. Chapter 129. At 6 o'clock, the last rays of the setting sun disappeared, leaving only the fiery red clouds behind. Since it was summer vacation, Yizhong High School was particularly quiet in the sunset. Even the 2 pairs of mandarin ducks reared in Swan Lake were resting on the water plants on the shore, rubbing their necks and enjoying the peaceful time. Yiqian walked out of the school, opened the car door, and got into the car. It was exactly 6 o'clock, not a minute or a second later. She was so punctual that Xia Jinyuan, who was in the car, felt a little helpless. This girl was way too punctual. She got into the car on time, not a minute or a second later. Just how much did she not want to spend another minute with him? You're so punctual. Aren't you afraid of being delayed midway? After starting the car, Xia Jinyuan smiled and asked Yiqian, who was still in her school uniform, You've been so punctual for 3 consecutive days. Yiqian, just how much do you not want to spend another minute with me? It was the same when she came back. She would get out of the car and say, Thank you for your hard work. Goodbye. She would leave him with her back facing him without looking back. On the first day, he hoped that she would turn around and wave at him after entering the school gate. On the second day, he hoped that she would show up 10 minutes early. On the third day, he didn't expect her to do so. When this girl was heartless, he would be so angry that his liver would hurt whenever he tried to be calculative. Sometimes, Xia Jinyuan's smile was faintly discernible. It was like a ripple, but also like a deep ancient well. There was always an unfathomable mystery to it. He was originally an extremely noble and elegant man. When he smiled at her from time to time, Yijian only felt that, every time she was with him, the air around her would become so thin that when she took a breath, it would be filled with the faint mint smell that belonged to him. She had always been able to deal with other people calmly, but in front of Xia Jinyuan, she only felt uneasy. When he heard this, he smiled and maintained his usual calmness. He said calmly, I'm very punctual. Captain Xia can also be punctual at 6 o'clock every day. You don't have to wait too long. If there's any delay midway, I won't let myself miss the appointment. But I wanted to come earlier to wait for you. What should I do? When the traffic lights changed, Xia Jinyuan, who had stopped steadily at the zebra crossing, turned his head sideways and saw Yiqian's indifferent expression. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said, Do you want me to turn up the air conditioner? You seem to be very hot. Of course it was hot. She had run all the way here at the right time. Even though the sun had set, it was still warm on such a hot day. What's more, the man sitting next to her always liked to say things that could cause misunderstandings. As an adult woman, wasn't it normal for her to be nervous? After repeating the words 20 years old several times in his heart, Yiqian finally got rid of the initial awkwardness he felt every time they met. When the green light turned green, Yiqian turned back and smiled at Xia Jinyuan, who was still releasing his masculine charm. Of course it's hot after running all the way here. What should I do? In order not to let Captain Xia leave me behind, I have to work harder. Xia Jinyuan smiled at her. That smile was like a blooming flower, enchanting yet pure. Her dark eyes were so beautiful that even the sunset couldn't compare to her beauty. Just like that, when he was caught off guard, her smile and her question of, "What should I do?" hit him hard in the eyes. It was as if it had left a mark in his heart. "Captain Xia, if you don't start the car soon, the traffic police uncle will be here." His absent-mindedness made the corners of Yi Jian's lips curl up slightly. Even her dark eyes rippled with a faint smile. She knew how to use his moves too. Chapter 130. From her slightly proud smile, he could tell that she had also made a move against him. As expected of a little fox. She knew how to counterattack so quickly. This is getting interesting, Yiqian. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and replied with a faint smile. Then he started the car under the urging of the people behind him. The little girl was smart, but she didn't know that men were born hunters. And he, Xia Jinyuan, was one of the best hunters. The more cunning she was, the more he was interested in her. Yiqian didn't understand, so naturally, he didn't know what men meant by hunting like. However, he subconsciously felt that the interesting in his words was already beyond the scope of normal communication. To her, the back and forth between an elegant and dangerous man was indeed interesting. Daoism raised her eyebrows slightly. She tilted her head and rested her elbows on the car window. She supported her chin with her hand and smiled as she looked at the man who had an elegant and arrogant expression. She said slowly, "What should I do? I also found it interesting." "Captain Xia, who do you think is more interested in who? Who is more interested in who? It's hard to say, at least for now." Xia Jinyuan raised the corners of his mouth and smiled lazily. "Yiqian, who do you think is more interested in who, a 14-year-old you and a 20-year-old adult man? Who is more interested in who?" The Chinese language was so broad and profound. A sentence would have different meanings when spoken by different people. Yiqian narrowed his eyes slightly. She wasn't only 14. Earlier, when he said, "interesting," there were some things that she didn't catch. But at this moment, when she saw the look in his eyes, which were as vast as the starry sky, she understood where this elegant man's interest in her came from. But if this was a hunt, she didn't mind giving it a try. She wanted to see who would become the prey. She straightened her body and leaned directly to the side of the man who was driving. Her eyes, which seemed to be rippling like water, were suffused with bits of starlight. She looked at him with a smile and stared at him without blinking. "Captain Xia, I'm not like you. I'm only 14 and I don't know anything. You say who is interested in whom? What does this interest mean? Can you explain it clearly?" She was so close to him, so close that her orchid-like breath swayed at the tip of his nose. Her beautiful black and white eyes were as pure as the stars, but also had the allure of a woman. It was this unique beauty that made him unconsciously think of her as a 14-year-old underage girl. "Are you tempted?" No, he was very clear that what he meant by "a little interesting" had nothing to do with his heart being moved. It was interest. It was standing in the position of a man and becoming interested in a woman. At the same time, he was also very clear that the woman he was interested in was only 14 years old. Therefore, his interest in her was pure and had nothing to do with lust. He just wanted to protect her as she grew up and waited for her to blossom. "Silly girl, don't think too much." Xia Jinyuan raised his hand and gently pinched the tip of her beautiful nose. His clear voice was 3 parts serious and 7 parts joking as he said, "I am interested in you, but it's not the kind of interest you think it is. Little girl, Don't think too much. Chapter 131. No one seemed to be able to guess what kind of person Xia Jinyuan was. He was so mysterious that it made people afraid, but at the same time, he was so real. He always had a way to make people obey him. While others were happy to be close to him, he would pull them apart again in an instant. Facing a man who could control all his emotions so easily, Yi Qian thought to herself, how hurtful. The tip of Yi Qian's nose was still warm from his fingertips. Her expression didn't change as she smiled and said, I'm sorry, I didn't think too much. First of all, I don't have time. Second of all, I'm young and don't understand. Third of all, I remember what Captain Xia said before. I need to keep a distance from men. Captain Xia is also a man, and a man who is even more outstanding than a little boy. Therefore, I need to keep a distance from Captain Xia. The little girl was so eloquent. Her trap was no worse than an adult's. She even knew how to shut him up. However, when the car screeched to a stop and the handbrake was pulled, Xia Jinyuan was already so close that she could see how thick his long eyelashes were. His deep and dark gaze fell straight on her hibiscus face that was smiling yet not smiling, and he laughed softly. No, you can keep a distance from all the men in the world, but you can't keep a distance from me. His voice was cold and clear, and when he suddenly spoke, it sounded like the soft notes of a guqin. That kind of low voice was so unique that every sentence and every word was branded with the elegant charm of a man named Xia Jinyuan. Alcohol could make people drunk, and he could do the same. Yi Qian didn't panic because of his sudden approach. On the contrary, the more it was like this, the more vigilant she was, and the calmer her eyes became. Of course I can't keep a distance from you, Captain Xia, because... Since he was so close to her, she didn't mind getting closer to him. Yi Jian, who was speaking with a faint smile, leaned forward a little more. Not only did it allow the two to breathe together, even the tip of their noses could touch each other's. I understand what Captain Xia means. He had to admit that the little girl was really cunning. Her actions made it impossible for him to take another step forward. This secret contest. What should he do? It seemed like he had lost. Looking at her dark eyes that were as pure as the night and focused on him as if he was the only one who existed, Xia Jinyuan's thin lips curled into a meaningful smile. He deliberately slowed down the speed of his speech and chuckled softly like a lover. That's what I mean now, but I don't know if it will be the same in the future. He had always been uninterested in women and things. Now that he met a young girl, he couldn't bear to see her being taken away by others. It really gave him a headache. It's unknown whether we'll meet again in the future. Yi Jian thought to herself, but she kept a smile on her face and said, who knows what will happen in the future? The most important thing now is to ask Captain Xia to guide me well. If they invited him to guide them, would they still be able to keep their distance? Obviously, it was impossible. What he said was exactly the same as what she said. The conversation was full of ambiguity, but it finally ended with the two of them keeping their minds on high alert. When the car drove into the provincial garrison, Yi Qian heard powerful shouts coming from the training ground. Chapter 132. The soldiers were sweating on the training field, using their youth to build steel walls and iron arms, waiting for the country to use them. As long as Yi Jian set foot on this land that was filled with dignity and passion at the same time, she would become extraordinarily different. Her eyes were filled with the coldness of a soldier. She liked it here. She liked the feeling of victory when she put on her training uniform and climbed over obstacles with the soldiers, passing through layers of barbed wire. She liked to sweat on the training field, laugh with the soldiers, bleed with them, and cry with them. Soldiers were trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. If you didn't get close to the world of the soldiers, you would never know how the young soldiers were trained and how they raced against time. The soldiers in their training uniforms were sitting in a neat circle on the training field. Xia Jinyuan was also one of the spectators. He quietly watched the girl who dared to wrestle with a soldier from Inner Mongolia on the training field. There was a faint smile in his deep black eyes as he focused all of his attention on her. He had already seen Yi Qian's training content. It was divided into 5 major trainings. The first one was weapons training. The second one was engineering training. The third one was communications training. The fourth one was commander's training. The fifth one was medical training. The fifth one was placed last because Uncle Jen and Principal Chen weren't good at it. At the same time, they wouldn't be able to understand it immediately. The first major weapons training was Yi Qian's current focus. It was to learn the performance of light weapons from the country and other countries. This included pistols, semi-automatic rifles, machine guns, mortars, anti-tank weapons, and anti-aircraft weapons. They would also undergo training in tactics, indirect firepower attacks, the use of portable anti-aircraft weapons, weapon disassembly, bomb disassembly, and other dangerous A-level training. Sniper training was attached to the first major training. So far, Yi Qian had learned the best from the first major training. After a week of training, Xia Jinyuan had a good understanding of Yi Qian's skills. Just as Principal Chen said, other than her lack of strength, she had reached a good standard in all other aspects. He avoided the first major training and tried his best to improve Yi Qian's combat skills. At the same time, he also had to teach her how to scout, defend, and non-traditional combat, assassination-type combat. It was already late at night, and the deafening shouts on the training ground had come to an end. After warming up, Yi Qian entered the training under Xia Jinyuan's guidance. It was already 10 o'clock at night when Yi Qian walked out of the provincial garrison's training ground. It had been like this for 7 consecutive nights. When Yi Qian returned to the provincial No. 1 middle school, it was exactly 11 o'clock at night when he returned to the dormitory through the back door. Survival, escape, resistance, and evasion are not only used in battle tactics, but they can also be used in combat. Xia Jinyuan, who had changed into a combat uniform, exuded an aura as cold as a sword. Even his dark eyes were filled with the glint of a sword. As he drove, his voice was solemn and cold as he steadily made a big turn. Digest what I've taught you in the past 7 days. I'll check on you when you come to Beijing. Yi Qian nodded gently and said seriously, I will. When are you leaving tomorrow? He had taught her diligently for 7 nights. He was leaving the next day, so it was only polite for him to ask. But, are you going to send me off? Xia Jinyuan smiled and glanced at her. He was not used to this little girl being polite. If you want to send me off, I'm afraid you won't be able to go back to school tonight. Chapter 133. There was no way the car could drive directly to the back gate of the school, so it could only stop at a residential building. Inside the sealed car after the engine was turned off, their breathing could be heard clearly. Yi Qian unlocked the car, opened the door, and jumped out. He chuckled at Xia Jinyuan, who was still sitting in the car. Don't be too optimistic, Captain Xia. Goodbye, I won't be seeing you off. Similar to all the key schools in the province, there were residential buildings near No. 1 middle school. The back gate of the school was built in the 1980s and was only 7 stories tall. There were rows of buildings, and the distance between each building was only a meter wide. Every night, Xia Jinyuan would park the car and personally send Yi Qian to school. Tonight was no exception. As she chuckled, he elegantly got out of the car. After closing the car door, he looked across the car at the girl who was standing under the streetlight. His thin lips curved into a sexy smile. Not even a hug before we part? We hugged enough on the training field. Why, Captain Xia still can't forget about it. Who didn't know how to tease people? After following him for a few days, no matter how stupid she was, she would have learned it. Yi Jian's eyes curved into crescents and there was a sly look in her eyes. When we get to the capital, we will have plenty of opportunities to hug each other. The girl's little mouth was getting more and more powerful. It seemed like he had to restrain himself. Otherwise, if he led her astray and made her tease other boys, he would definitely be angry. After the summer break, this old-fashioned residential building, which was built in the 1980s and only had 7 floors, was dark except for a few scattered lights. The two of them walked past a few residential buildings. Almost at the same time, their gazes fell on the same direction. With a cold look in his eyes, Yi Qian said to him, It's not far. I can go by myself. It didn't feel good to be watched for several nights in a row. You want to go up and take a look alone? Xia Jinyuan didn't stop, nor did he agree. He only sent her there. If you want to go up, I can accompany you. I want to go and take a look. I've been keeping watch for a few nights. I want to ask the higher-ups if they're tired. Yi Qian chuckled. Suddenly, his eyes turned cold. His gaze was sharp as he looked at the window where only a single lamp was lit. Behind the window, someone was so scared that his hands trembled. He reflexively put down the curtains, grabbed the cup on the desk, and gulped down the water. It was too frightening. Yi Qian's gaze was murderous. It was so cold that her heart almost jumped out of her chest. About 3 minutes later, the frightened man gently patted his chest to calm himself down. Then he gently lifted the curtain. He was about to raise the camera in his hand and record the scene of a man and a woman coming back from a walk in the middle of the night. Just as she opened the curtains slightly, under the illumination of the table lamp, she saw a face suddenly approaching from outside the window. Ah! Liao Jian, who was holding the camera, screamed in horror as if he had seen a ghost. In the end, he couldn't hold onto the camera in his hand. With a bang, it fell heavily to the ground. He didn't know if it was broken. The window was completely open. Yi Qian pushed off the windowsill and stood on the windowsill. He then pulled the curtains open and saw Liao Jian, who was standing against the wall in shock. He was staring outside in horror. At his feet was an imported camera. Chapter 134. Yi Qian bent over and crawled through the unsecured window. He calmly jumped into the room and bent over to pick up the camera under Liao Jian's shocked gaze. Yi Qian didn't communicate with him at all. He picked up the camera, stepped on the desk, bent over, and jumped down lightly. He disappeared from the room. Liao Jian stood there motionless, his eyes fixed on the camera. When he saw Yi Qian jump down from the window, he shivered and ran to the desk as if his soul had returned to him. He propped himself up with both hands and looked down. He saw Yi Qian waving at him under the streetlight. Liao Jian's face turned even paler. He didn't dare to look any further. He reached out with trembling hands and slammed the window shut. He collapsed onto the floor. How did Yi Qian jump down from the 7th floor? How did he climb from the 1st floor to the 7th floor in the blink of an eye? An unprecedented fear filled Liao Jian's heart. He regretted agreeing to Yi Ying's request to come all the way to First High School to spy on someone he couldn't even handle. No, he had to go back to town tomorrow. He couldn't let Yi Qian keep an eye on him. Downstairs, Yi Qian said something. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyes and looked at the dark window. He pursed his thin lips and said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid that your sister is hiding something. Since you suspect that she's trying to stop you from qualifying, Yi Qian, you have to be careful in school." He had seen fights between girls before. They happened in the dark and were impossible to guard against. The next day, Ying sat in the classroom and stared at the camera on the desk. Even though her palm-sized face pretended to be calm, her trembling eyelashes betrayed her feelings. "I'm sorry, it's broken. Please explain it to Liao Jian when you see him." Yi Qian's clear eyes stared at Yi Ying, who had lowered her head in guilt. He said coldly, "Please return this broken toy to Liao Jian. He probably won't ask me to pay for it." Yi Ying gently closed her eyes. When she raised her eyes, there was a haze in her eyes. "Return it to whoever you took it from. What do you mean by giving it to me? Please move aside, I still need to study. I also want to hand it over to classmate Liao personally, but thinking about how I scared him last night, I reckon he won't dare to see me now. But he will definitely come." Yi Qian's finger tapped lightly on the desk. His calm tone faintly revealed a coldness that made Yi Ying panic. "If you don't want any accidents to happen before the exam, Yi Ying, you'd better behave yourself." Yi Ying's heart trembled slightly as she bit her lower lip and didn't say anything else. Her words were full of threats and were as cold as icicles. At the same time, he heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, they both had to face an exam. Otherwise, with the wretched girl's current temper, she probably wouldn't let him have a good time. After realizing that she had found an unreliable person to help her, Ying vented all her anger on Liao Jian. She scolded him so much that she even broke a camera that cost a few thousand yuan. Liao Jian originally wanted to remind her to be careful of Yi Qian, but after scolding her, Liao Jian, whose eyes were about to spit fire, left just as he was about to slap her. Remind my ass. If you have the ability, go deal with it yourself. After this incident, Yi Ying really did behave and didn't dare to do anything else. Chapter 135. The 15 days of intensive training ended on July 17th. That night, the 12 students left for the capital under the lead of the teachers. All the students had not yet recovered from the excitement of coming to the heart of the motherland, the capital. From July 19th to July 23rd, the 5-day test was held directly. When they arrived in the capital, they found out that the provinces sent out students from the 2nd and 3rd grades. However, the famous schools in the capital not only had high school, but also middle school. On the first day, 4 out of the 12 students were eliminated. On the second day, 3 more were eliminated. On the third day, 2 more were eliminated. Out of the 12 students, only Yi Qian, Ying, and Gao Yang were left. The atmosphere in the examination hall was quite tense. 4 days of difficult written tests, oral tests, questions snatching, and so on. Even the usually calm Yi Qian's palms were sweating. However, whenever it was her turn to fight, she would straighten her back and calmly look at her opponent with her dark eyes. She would calmly and quickly answer the teacher's questions. There were a total of 14 teachers who had been awarded the title of National Outstanding Teacher. The physics, chemistry, and mathematics teachers took turns to throw out questions, bombarding each class with questions. It was not a one-to-one test at all. It was a cross-examination where questions from each class appeared at any time. Correct answer. Correct answer. Correct answer. Every time Yi Qian answered consecutively, the invigilator's voice would be particularly loud. After 16 tests, this beautiful girl with bright eyes was firmly in first place with a 100% correct rate. Even the 2 high school students who had participated in the mathematical Olympiad 3 years ago were suppressed by her. Gao Yang was also very outstanding. His correct rate had always been in the top 3 in the junior high school. On the other hand, Yi Ying repeatedly made mistakes after entering the cross-examination. Wrong answer, 3 wrong questions in a row. Student Yi Ying from Fujian Town in the southern province, eliminated. After 30 minutes of suppressive questions, Yi Ying sat in the examination hall with a pale face. However, her eyes were fixed on Yi Qian, who was still fighting with 7 students from the 3 famous schools in the capital. Watching her eliminate a student effortlessly and hearing her face the English teacher's questions in English, her fluent English was as natural as her mother tongue. There was no pause at all. She really knew how to speak English. Damn it. Why didn't he know about it? She saw the smiles of approval on the faces of all the teachers present. Those smiles were for Yi Qian. She was smiling at the wretched girl whom she had always looked down upon and despised. Yi Ying's sharp nails dug deep into her palms, but she did not feel any pain. She only felt that Yi Qian standing on the exam platform was such an eyesore that she wished she could get rid of him as soon as possible. What right did an orphan girl have to stand here and receive the attention of all the teachers? What right did he have to stand here and receive everyone's admiration? If it wasn't for her, she would definitely be able to qualify. It was that damned Yi Qian who had given her so much pressure, causing her to lose time and again. On the exam platform, Yi Qian answered the English teacher's question with a slight smile. That smile naturally revealed his tenacity and confidence, which instantly attracted everyone's attention. Her memory is far better than all the students here. We have no reason to stop an outstanding student from leaving the country. Yi Qian from Fujian Town High School in the southern province has qualified. After a short discussion among several senior teachers, the first to qualify was not a student from the capital, but a student from the depths of the mountains. Chapter 136. The applause came from the competitors, the teachers, and the candidates who had already been eliminated. Yi Qian, who was the first to advance, stood on the exam platform with a decent smile on his face. In the face of the thunderous applause, he calmly bowed and said, "Thank you." His calm demeanor was even more in line with the teachers' hearts. When Principal Chao, who had been accompanying him all this time, heard Yi Qian's name, he unscrewed the bottle cap with trembling hands and took 3 pills in a row. In the capital, in the most heavily guarded military compound, Xia Jinyuan was wearing a short-sleeved uniform and a bow tie as he walked down the stairs. He was wearing a military summer uniform, which was tucked into his perfectly ironed dark green military trousers and tied with a brown leather belt, which perfectly accentuated his sexy and muscular waist. His broad shoulders, slender legs, and every step he took was noble and elegant. Everything about him was like a gentleman's elegance. Someone once commented that Xia Jinyuan, who was wearing a military summer uniform, had a kind of uniform temptation that made people want to turn into a hooligan and pounce on him to take off his clothes. Other than this uniform temptation, there was no one else. "Dad, I'm going out for a while." When he went downstairs, he saw Commander-in-Chief Xia sitting on the sofa drinking tea and reading the newspaper leisurely. "You should rest early. I might be back later." Commander-in-Chief Xia didn't expect his son to be at home. When he heard the voice behind him, he turned around in surprise and said, "Where did you come from? Why didn't you make a sound?" He also saw that he was wearing a summer uniform. It was obvious that he had specially cleaned up. Commander-in-Chief Xia put down the newspaper and stood up to look at his handsome son with interest. "Oh, the sun rose from the west. You know how to clean up? Going on a date? Which family's girl is she from? If you succeed, bring her home for me to see." Other people's sons could change girlfriends 4 or 5 times a year. Why was it that his son had never brought home a single woman in a year? If it weren't for the fact that he had found some children's dishes in his study room, he would have suspected that his son had spent so much time in the army that he only liked military uniforms and no longer liked women's makeup. Xia Jinyuan lowered his head and looked at his outfit. There was nothing special about it, so he raised his eyebrows and said, "When did I ever dress up? It doesn't count as a date, but it is indeed a meeting with a little girl. Also, don't overthink it. She's a 14-year-old girl, a middle school student." Then he was really overthinking it. Commander-in-Chief Xia immediately lost interest and waved his hand to chase him away. "Go, go, go. Go and have fun. Don't come back for dinner tonight. I'll go to your Uncle Han's house for dinner." Xia Jinyuan had already walked out of the compound. He drove his own car and rushed to his destination. Yi Qian walked out of the exam hall hurriedly towards the school gate. He only had 4 minutes to meet with Xia Jinyuan. If he couldn't leave, he had to run. "Yi Qian." Someone chased after him. He took big steps as if he was afraid that she would leave. "Where are you going now?" "Later, Yi Ying and the others will go back. We plan to have dinner outside and send them to the train." Students who failed to make the cut were not allowed to stay in the capital. They were led back to the southern province by the teachers of the provincial No. 1 middle school. Gao Yang was familiar with the capital. After asking the teacher in charge, they agreed to go to Wangfujing to eat the specialties of the capital. The rest of the students agreed readily, except for Yi Qian. He had only said a few words to Yi Ying and she had already disappeared from the scene. Chapter 137. Yi Qian felt helpless when he heard Gao Yang's voice coming from behind him. He was just short of pasting the word "reject" on his forehead. Why did he still take the initiative to come over and greet him? He thought he had made himself clear the last time, but it was still the same. He turned around and rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. He looked at the handsome young man in front of him and sighed. "Classmate Gao, it seems I have to repeat myself. I really don't like. Why don't you like me? Just because I'm pursuing Yi Ying?" Gao Yang didn't want to hear such words again. Moreover, he didn't understand why she hated him so much. Thinking back, he really couldn't recall doing anything that made her hate him. He didn't want her to treat him like a spring breeze, but he still wanted to be like an ordinary schoolmate and be able to communicate peacefully. He didn't want to be at daggers drawn as soon as he spoke. Yi Qian, who had been interrupted by him, smiled knowingly and praised him. Not bad. At least you know your place. Yi Ying, who couldn't help but walk out after hearing this, acted as if she had discovered a new continent. She seemed to have understood something and walked over with a sneer. Classmate Gao has always had a good reputation in school, but you, Yi Qian, are always against him. I didn't understand before, but now that you've said it, I understand. He's pursuing me, so you hate him? Can I say that your hatred is born out of love? It sounded quite reasonable. Gao Yang's cold, handsome face looked a little awkward because of her words. He turned to look at Yi Ying and scolded her in a low voice. What nonsense are you saying? Like him? He wasn't stupid enough to not know the difference between love and hate. Yi Qian clearly hated him. It had nothing to do with love. I didn't say anything. Didn't she admit it herself? Ying glanced at him with a smile and chuckled. Gao Yang, what should we do? Why don't you stop pursuing me and just pursue our famous classmate Yi Qian? I don't want to waste the last bit of our sisterhood because of a boy. Acting had always been Yi Ying's specialty. Just like now, her eyes were cold, but she could still pretend to be smiling. Yi Qian sneered and said calmly, Don't. Yi Ying's standards have always been very high. It's not easy for you to find a boy who can catch your eye. Please don't give him to me, I'm afraid. After he finished speaking, he deliberately paused for a moment. He then saw Yi Ying's expression change abruptly. Even her gaze became exceptionally sharp. If you're not that generous, then don't pretend to be. Look at your little face. Look at how scared you are. Yi Qian was teasing Yi Ying as if he was teasing a puppy. With just a few words, he was able to make Yi Ying's emotions fluctuate. He lifted his chin slightly and said to Gao Yang, Have a good talk with your girlfriend. Don't talk about giving in so easily. If you really give it to me, what if I'm bored and take it again? I'm afraid she'll cry herself to death in the toilet. Also, don't talk to me about sisterhood. It sounds fake. Every word he said didn't leave any face. Every word he said made Ying feel as if she had lost all her face. Yi Ying, who was already so angry that her lungs were about to explode, was wary of Gao Yang's presence. She wanted to maintain her ladylike demeanor, but she didn't want to swallow her anger. She rebuked, Yi Qing, you're really something. Gao Yang isn't an object. You want to snatch him away? That depends on whether he agrees or not. Save some face for yourself. Don't let others look down on you. Chapter 138. Beside them, Gao Yang's expression turned ugly. Ying, she didn't say anything about snatching. You don't have to overthink it. Girls always like to overthink things. He could clearly hear Yi Qian's mockery, but Ying thought that Yi Qian was provoking her. What did he mean by she didn't have to overthink it? Hearing this, Ying laughed coldly. I'm not overthinking it. I've never seen her hate you before. Now that you're walking a little closer to me, she looks disgusted. Isn't this hatred born from love? Hatred born from love? A clear voice with a hint of laughter came slowly. Then, a slender figure strolled in the sunset, gracefully walking over like a god. Hey, little girl, when did you ever hate me? After waiting for 5 minutes, she still hadn't come over. It turned out that she was blocked by someone. When Yi Qian heard that voice and what he said, he felt his head hurt even more. Why did he enter the school? If you still don't come, I'm afraid that you'll be bullied until you cry. Xia Jinyuan's handsome face held a faint smile as he walked over and stood beside Yi Qian. He didn't look at the other two. Instead, he smiled and looked at Yi Qian, who was late for the first time. He raised his hand and intimately flicked his finger on Yi Qian's forehead. You're late today and left me waiting outside for so long. Tell me, how are you going to make it up to me? He couldn't stand it anymore. How could a little girl be so scheming? Every word she said was an attempt to trample on Yi Qian's image. He really couldn't understand what girls were thinking these days. Belittling their classmates like this, could it show that they were virtuous? Yi Qian was already used to Xia Jinyuan flicking his finger on his forehead. He only frowned and rubbed his forehead. Sorry for the delay. It's fine now. Let's go. After saying that, he turned around and walked towards the school gate. Xia Jinyuan couldn't help but laugh. It was only then that he raised his eyes slightly. His cold and sharp gaze swept across the boy who had already pursed his lips tightly, then gently landed on the girl who had subconsciously tightened her grip on the boy's shirt ever since he appeared. He curled his lips mockingly. Even though he didn't say a word, it was enough to make the two of them tense up. His cold gaze, his cold smile. This arrogant man was clearly telling Yiqian and Gao Yang that he couldn't be bothered to speak to them, to the point where even a glance was beneath him. Xia Jinyuan felt that it was beneath his dignity to argue with children. However, Yiqian, that narrow-minded girl, would probably be more than happy to settle the score with them. In order to make the little lass feel better, he didn't mind occasionally doing one or two things that were beneath his dignity. "Huh, you're really something. You even managed to seduce a soldier." Ying waited until the two of them were out of sight before she spoke through gritted teeth. She was still afraid. When the soldier in the military uniform swept his cold gaze over her, all the hairs on her body stood on end. She was so afraid that she didn't dare to raise her head. As a result, she couldn't even see what the soldier looked like. After a while, Gao Yang finally looked away. After hearing what she said, he frowned and said in a low voice, "He's not an ordinary soldier. He's a very young major." "A major?" Ying furrowed her pretty brows. "What's a major? You seem to be like me." She was quite afraid and didn't finish her sentence. She felt a little embarrassed to say it out loud. Chapter 139. For Ying, who had never been in contact with military ranks, she naturally didn't know, but Gao Yang knew. Looking at Ying's fearful expression, Gao Yang sighed softly, "I'm as scared as you." "Forget it, it doesn't matter if she doesn't know. If she doesn't want to go, we'll go ourselves." He paused, frowned slightly, and said in a deep voice, "You didn't have to pick on Yiqian just now. I'm not so stupid that I can't tell the difference between love and hate." At this moment, Yi Ying's beautiful eyes were completely gloomy. After staring for a while, her beautiful eyes were faintly moist, and she revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. "Is that so? Then I'll just treat it as a misunderstanding. I'm sorry, I don't want to go tonight either. Goodbye." She didn't insist on her views in front of him, but instead took all the blame. Coupled with the faint tears in her eyes, it was enough to make a 15-year-old boy like Gao Yang surrender and admit his mistake. Seeing him apologize to her, Ying faintly smiled. She had always known how to use her advantages, and she was also good at manipulating people. Teacher Zhu and the Capital Experimental Middle School's director Li walked out as they spoke. "Then, I'll have to trouble you about the tickets, Director Li." Seeing Gao Yang in front, he said a few words to Director Li and then walked over with a smile. When Gao Yang and Ying heard that the Capital Experimental Middle School had already arranged for cars to go to the orchard farm on the outskirts of the capital after the preliminaries for the students to relax, they were stunned. "What? You don't believe me? Haha, I didn't lie to you. Quickly go and inform the other 3 students. Yiqian doesn't need to go, I'll talk to her." Teacher Zhu patted Gao Yang's shoulder, and the smile on his face deepened. "There are only a few days left until the competition. This is specially arranged for the 12 of you to relax. Are basking in your glory." Teacher Zhu's gaze lightly glanced at Ying. The two of them seemed to be walking very close. Why did it seem like they were in a relationship? "You mean that we'll all stay at the farm tonight and we'll only be back at noon tomorrow?" A trace of darkness flashed across Yi Ying's beautiful eyes, and she asked uncertainly, "What time will we leave the capital tomorrow? Can you catch the train if you don't come back for one night?" Teacher Zhu smiled and said, "Don't worry, we'll definitely be able to go home tomorrow. Quick, we agreed to meet in 20 minutes. Let's meet 10 minutes earlier." When Ying saw this, her eyes flickered slightly. She said to Gao Yang impatiently, "Then I'll inform the girls. You go inform the boys." After that, he said goodbye to Teacher Zhu and left in a hurry. Not only was her eyes gloomy, but they were also filled with a frightening malice. Yi Qian, who had already walked out of the school, did not immediately get into the car. He looked at the man, who was as straight as a spear, and a trace of amazement flashed in his eyes. In his military uniform, Xia Jinyuan not only raised his temperament to the peak, but he also looked as elegant as jade. He felt that a gentleman should be like this, and his every move was noble and extraordinary. "I'm sorry, I can't go out tonight. Just now, Teacher Zhu from the provincial first high school said that the school arranged for the 12 of us to stay at an orchard farm. I didn't refuse." Yiqian raised his eyes slightly and quietly concealed his amazement. "I can only miss tonight. I'm very sorry." Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.